Michelle. So many of you probably already know Kevin Leonard, who is a fellow Rotarian from the Boise Downtown Club. He's been a Rotarian for a long time, and a lot of us who attend various regional meetings or conferences have gotten to know him over the years. You may not know that Kevin, though, is the director of the Venture College at Boise State University, which means a lot of things, and he'll be telling you more about that. But also, he helped form the Boise Angel Alliance, which is an angel investing club up there. Now it's 10 years old. The Alliance has helped 30 entrepreneurs raise more than $3 million of equity from the local Boise community. Those entrepreneurs have gone to raise more than $100 million in capital from other venture or private equity funds, and have created more than 300 high-paying jobs in the Treasure Valley. So because Kevin was on his way to Salt Lake, was coming through Twin Falls today, I asked him if he'd like to stop by and talk to us about our opportunities here potentially to assist the entrepreneurs in Twin and the Magic Valley to help them get their businesses going. Kevin, thanks.
Thanks, Melinda, and President Michelle. Congratulations to you. We just figured out that we have something in common, because my wife, who for the last 15 years has been the marketing and PR manager for the Boise Parks and Recreation system, is just going to go to work for St. Luke's and be a colleague of Michelle. She's going to be involved in community engagement throughout the entire system. And Michelle you're on the interview committee. You're going to talk to her. I was like, well, that's cool. All right. Hey, thank you for having me. Melinda and I sat next to each other at the Sun Valley Convention in one of the events, and she said, how's that angel thing going? And we began talking about it. And she said, well, would you come down and tell us about it? So we talk about economic development, and those of us, at least in the Treasure Valley, are in awe of what you've accomplished down here with the companies that you've attracted to the Magic Valley and these big factories. And it's like, wow, that's really amazing. And that's certainly one aspect of economic development. But another aspect of economic development is about helping entrepreneurs. And ever since I retired from the College of Idaho, which has now been 15 years or something like that, I've been heavily involved in Rotary, of course, my first passion, but my second passion has been how do we help create an entrepreneurial ecosystem so that entrepreneurs can thrive. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've tried to do in Boise. Start out and say entrepreneurs are everywhere. They're just people that have ideas. But if those ideas are going to turn into something interesting commercially, typically they need two things. One, they need mentors. Most entrepreneurs are fairly young. They're inexperienced about business, they know their product or their service really well, and so they need mentors and help to get them going. And that's what we're doing at Boise State in my other job, which is Venture College, and we'll come back and tell you more about that sometime. But we're helping students at Boise State, while they pursue their education, start businesses. The other thing they need is capital, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit today, and where does it come from and what do we do with it? So we'll see, Kevin. All right. Okay, I went too fast, I think. Now I'm at the very end. All right, let's go down here. All right, let's go to the end of the show. And start it again at the beginning. Can we do that?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay.
I think.
So always getting going. I want to talk a little bit about angels. What is an angel? And this term comes from Broadway many years ago, when producers would go out and find wealthy and perhaps not very smart people who would invest in their shows. And they were, considered angels, and maybe part of that was because they never actually really made any money at it. It was sort of a philanthropic thing to do. And that term is carried on now. Well, today, angels are a really important part of the ecosystem of the American entrepreneurial system. So what is an angel? An angel is an individual with a reasonably high net worth, in other words, some discretionary funds, that chooses to invest some of those funds in early stage ventures, and along with his or her talent and advice. Very important, not just money, it's money and talent. And their goals are this, and let me just start off by saying, people who make angel investments, if they're doing this because they think they're going to make a hell of a lot of money, they're going to be sadly disappointed in all likelihood. There's a lot easier ways to invest your money. The number one reason people do this, we have more than 100 of them now in the Treasure Valley engaged in this operation, is because they're trying to help entrepreneurs. Life's been pretty good to me. I started a business, I grew it, somebody bought it. It's now time for me to give back. And so we do it to help create an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Now, it's not a gift. We are serious about trying to make money in the process. But if you will, keep that in perspective. It's about helping entrepreneurs first, and by the way, we expect to make a return. And then the third thing is, this is really fun. It's really cool for guys with the color of hair that I have to be able to work with young entrepreneurs and learn about the technology and the things that they're doing. So that's what we're trying to do. Now, let me just talk for a moment about an angel fund, because angels, people who write checks to businesses, and there's basically two ways to do this. One is the next door neighbor's kid grew up and came to see you one time, so I get this really great idea, and you said, what the hell, and you wrote a check to him. And then you probably lost your money and said, I'm never doing that again. That's sort of individual, write a check to a business, not particularly organized, is one way. Another way, what we've done in Boise is bring groups of people together, form an LLC. We've all agreed to put some money into that LLC, and then collectively we make investment decisions and we invest out of that LLC. That does several things for us. First of all, it imposes a group discipline, right? It keeps crazy Kevin from writing another check and having his wife go, what the hell did you do that for? Because when you get a group together and they're talking about writing checks, it gets pretty serious in a hurry. Second, it gives you diversification. It's not just writing a check, and I'll share some data with you in a few minutes, but if you're going to do this as an investment, you've got to be diversified. You've got to have multiple investments. So it sort of allows you to do that. For the entrepreneurs, it gives them a place to go. There's actually a website, BoiseAngelAlliance.org, and entrepreneurs in the Treasure Valley can click on that. They can submit an application, and they will get a decision. And for most entrepreneurs, raising capital is terribly frustrating, because they go and they call on Melinda, and she says, well, I don't know, maybe we can find some money in this pot or not, come back and see me next month. Then they call on Michelle and she says, well, guys, this looks interesting, let me talk to my husband, why don't you come back and see me next month, and you get this process continued. So there's a place where they can go. Now, most of them are not happy because they get turned down. That's just the reality of how the system works. But in fact, there's a place and a process for them to go to. Just let me give you a little sense as to how big this is. We all hear about venture capital. These are data from last year. Venture capitalists in the United States last year invested $48 billion, and they did that in a little over 4,000 deals. So I've done the math for you. That's $11 million per investment. You're not going to finance a startup entrepreneur in Treasure Valley or Magic Valley with venture capital. It's simply not going to happen. But if we look at the angel side of this, that's a very large market. $24 billion last year invested in private deals by individuals in the United States. Almost 75,000 deals. And you can see the average investment round is in the neighborhood of $300,000. Now that's not from one investor. That may be from 20 or 30 investors, but it gives you some perspective of the size. And so we get all worried and we don't have enough venture capital, and it's like, really, we're never going to have venture capital here of any significant size. We just don't have companies of that size. All right, I'm going to walk over here and I want to show you some of this. The data is a little hard on it, but I can make it clear for you. This is a graph of net job creation, net new job creation in the United States year by year. It comes from the Census Bureau. And what it is jobs created less jobs lost. This top, and this is zero. So when you got a graph down here, that means there were more jobs destroyed than there were created. The three lines are this. The top line is jobs created, net new jobs created in the U.S. economy by companies 5 years old and younger. The orange line, which is kind of at 0, is net jobs created by companies 6 to 10 years old. And this horrible looking yellow line are jobs created by companies older than 10 years. And here, ladies and gentlemen, are the facts. 100% of the net new job creation in the United States of America for the last umpty-ump years comes from companies 5 years old and younger. Companies 10 years old and older across the economy are job destroyers. If we look at our own experience, of course we all love how big companies that come in, they hire a bunch of people and here they go. But my goodness, when I was a young man in Boise, young businessman, we had Morrison Knudsen, Albertsons, Boise Cascade, or Ida. HP came to town, Micron. Morrison Knudsen's out of business. Albertsons died and came back, but their employment in the Treasure Valley is not near what it was. HP got to 12 or 14,000 people, and now they're 3 or 4,000 people. Micron went through the roof, now they're down. And so my thesis to you is, if you want to have a healthy economy, you want to create an ecosystem where the entrepreneurs can keep creating new jobs. And the good news is, some of them fail, but when they do, it's only an impact of 3 or 4 jobs, right? It's not a big deal. But collectively, when you make this happen, you get an ecosystem that works. All right, what do we need this money for? When a business starts, it bleeds cash, right? It's got to make payroll. It doesn't have any customers. It's got to pay rent. It's got to, it's got to buy some equipment, some inventory. And so this red down here is the cash deficit that every new business starts. And we call it the valley of death because at some point it must go this way or the business dies, right? I tell my students, you can recover from almost any mistake in business except for one. If you run out of cash, they take you out of the game and you don't get to come back. All right, now, clear out here, and we've got some bankers in the room, I'm sure. This is where banks begin to get interested, right? You got a company that's cash flowing, it's beginning to grow, we got receivables, we got collateral, we got working capital lines, but no, we don't want our banks investing down here. We want to make sure that when my check hits the bank, it clears. This is risk capital down here. Where does it come from? So the first place it comes from on the far left side is from the founders. I work with lots of young people, so they want to know what's the number one thing you do when you get out of school. Keep living like a poverty-stricken kid and save your money, because that's the best place it's going to come from. And then after that, typically it will come from what we call family and friends, or sometimes family, friends, and fools, and former friends. These are very early sources of capital, and almost every new business starts there. I thought my parents and my partner Gary Mon's parents were so smart. When we got our business going, then we're out of cash, and they both invested some money in our business, and I of course thought, wow, they have a lot of confidence in us, they know we're going to make them a lot of money. And it wasn't until my own children grew up and reached that stage that I realized that my parents were scared to death that I would fail and come live in the basement again. That's why they made their investment. Family and friends invest for emotional reasons. They invest because they love you, because they know you, because they trust you, because they don't understand what the hell you're doing, but you've always been an interesting kid. So that's a reality. Then after you get through that, and it's a small percentage of the businesses that get to these next stage, we're talking about businesses that have the potential to grow and scale. Then you get to more professional sources of money, one of which is angels. And so that's kind of that second and third section over there. And that's what we're trying to do with these angel investments, is take these companies that have kind of gotten started, they've raised a little money from family and friends and their own credit cards and whatnot, and now made it to the point that if they had some capital, they could begin to grow. All right, here's a little bit about, let's see if I can get rid of that. A little data for the Boise Angels. We've been now looking at deals for 10 years. Just look at the far right side. We looked at 450 deals over 10 years. You said, where the hell did all those come from? Well, if you put a website out and say, we have money to invest, you'd be surprised who comes out of the woodwork. And frankly, most of those deals you're not going to look at. I mean, there are still people out there that have perpetual motion machines and carburetors. If they told you how they work, the oil companies would kill them. I mean, you know, great, we get all that stuff. That's easy to screen out. But of that 450 deals, about 100 of them, about 25% of them came in front of our membership and made an investment pitch to us. And of that, we invested in 27 of them. So we invested in about 6% of the deals that came before us. The entrepreneurs think that's horrifying, and nationally we're investing at about 3 times the rate that most angel groups are. So either we're smarter than they are, I don't know what it is. But anyway, that gives you some sense of that. Now let me show you the capital. All right, I'll tell you about that, then we'll go back. What's happened? This I've been tracking since we started. What's the employment of these companies? Now, this is not a panacea. This is not recruiting a bunch of jobs to your community. It takes a long time. But you can see this is the graph of full-time equivalent employment by those companies who invested in year by year. And by 2014, that had reached 330 jobs. I only do this once a year, but I'm going to guess it'll be 500 jobs by the end of this year, because, of course, once some of these companies get going, they're beginning to scale. They're beginning to get pretty good employment. And guess what? Cradle Point's one of them. Those jobs over there are $50, $75, $100, $150,000 a year jobs. So we help get that company going. All right. Here's just some of the names, and then I'll shut up and take questions right away. I'll tell you a couple of stories. These are all local Treasure Valley companies that we've invested in. And I tell you right at the offset, if you're really, really good at doing this, then only 50% of your deals will fail. We've had 6 deals exit. 1 we got our money back, no more, no less. 1 we made 2.5 times our money on. 1 we made almost 10 times our money on. We've had 3 bankruptcies. So we're right about where expects to be. Take a couple of these over here. Nurture, it says sold on the right side. Linda specifically asked me to talk about that, because I go out and talk to communities like you, say, well, do we have any deals? Well, I'll tell you something you know a hell of a lot about in this valley, and we know in Idaho, it's about food. So we financed 3 food companies. Nurture were these 2 young women, young enough that they started having babies after we invested in them. And they had an idea of creating a line of organic, natural baby food. And I'll have to admit, when I heard them, I was really doubtful. It's like, really? They sell these little glass jars at Safeways and Albertsons. They've been there for 100 years, and you're going to sell baby food that's going to cost 3 times as much. Who the hell will pay that? And then my daughters-in-law began having babies, and I understood how much the world had changed. That company went from nothing to $77 million of sales in 5 years. Danone, the yogurt company out of Paris, France, bought it, paid $222 million for a company that was doing $70 million in sales. We put 150 grand into it, we got $1,050,000 back. And the company now employs about 40 people in the Treasure Valley.
Go organic baby food.
Go organic baby food. We've invested in an organic natural butter substitute called Melt. That company came out of Haley. It's in about 5,000–6,000 storefronts now, starting to scale. Our most recent investment is organic natural burrito, and it's in about 400 or 500 stores. And if you stop and think about it, Fortune had a big article on this, but you see it in your own supermarkets and perhaps in your own consumption. You know, nobody buys Campbell's chicken noodle soup that my mother served me 2 times a week my entire childhood, right? Mothers don't want that salty commercial stuff. They're looking for organic, natural foods, and we're seeing that. So we've been investing in those kinds of companies. Some of these are technology companies. Some of them are product companies. Weghorst down here on the right is just this brilliant young attorney from Moffitt Thomas who spun out and is bound and determined that she's going to create and scale a better way for couples to divorce. She now has more than 400 attorneys working for her around the United States. So, that's a story of what we've done in Boise. I'm here on a little bit of yeah, there's lots of ways to make money, okay? Take advantage of society's issues. So what questions might you have for me about this? Anybody want to ask anything about it?
What's Cradle Point?
So Cradle Point, if you go to, say, Redbox, which is going to be obsolete here before long, and rent a movie in a little box that sits outside of McDonald's, there's a box in there that has to communicate with the internet. They make that box. And it has exploded because everything now has to communicate with the internet. They were nearly bankrupt 3 years ago, got a new CEO in there, and they're just exploding. They've got 2 office buildings in downtown Boise and maybe 150 engineers working for them. Is there anything else? Yeah.
Do you ever help clients go from getting a patent to developing the business, or is that too early on before the angels would step in?
So the question is, do we get involved in patents? And really the issue is about intellectual property. And, you know, all companies like intellectual property, investors like intellectual property. We want to know that if your theory of your business is based upon exploiting intellectual property, that you own it and that you have protected it as best you can. Our particular case, we're not overly enamored with patents. Sometimes they fit. Patents are very expensive. And the problem with a patent is when General Motors sues you, how will you defend yourself? But certainly there's now an IP bar in the state of Idaho. When I drove in down here and I was listening to public radio on Twin Falls, and the sponsor for this half hour was one of the IP companies, IP law firms. I don't know if they have an office here, but they have an office in Salt Lake, and they bought a firm in Boise. So intellectual property is generally important to all of us. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what would be the process of getting such an organization started?
The question is, what would be the process of getting such an organization started? What you need, some idiots like Kevin Learned, who one day said, I'm just going to make this happen. And I went out and buttonholed a bunch of my friends and convinced them that we all ought to put some money in a pot, and then we figured out how to do this. Fortunately, the state of the industry has progressed, but it starts with, if this is something that some of you are interested in doing here, then you got to find some people who are willing to put some money up. To create one of these, and so I'll tell you a little bit about the fund. We've created our 3rd fund. First 2 funds, each of those funds are $1 million to $1.5 million in size. The investors in it, it's a securities offering, private securities offering. The investors in it commit $50,000 to buy a unit in the fund. And at the time you start the fund, you put 20% in, or $10,000, and then as you invest the money, as you make investments, you call the rest of your capital. Now, $50,000 for some people is not very much. For some people, it's a lot. What's happened is often we get syndicates come together, and there's 4 or 5 people, and they buy a unit together. So let's say it's 4 people, so their commitment isn't $50,000, it's $12,500. But you have to find a group of people that are willing to put their money where their mouth is and say, we'll put the capital up to do that. We've created 3 funds. The first 2 are now fully invested and waiting to harvest their investments, if you will. We work with these companies. Sometimes we have seats on the board. We try to help them as best we can. And the 3rd company, the 3rd fund is now about 50% invested, and sometime this fall we'll start the next one. So we've now got a system going. We got enough people involved. We have about 125 investors across these funds. The funds are all managed by the members. These are volunteer efforts. It's just like a Rotary Club. There's a chair and a treasurer and committees, and they figure out their processes. We'd be delighted to share our processes with you. We've paid a lot of dumb tax to get to the point that we're at. Yes?
Do you watch Shark Tank?
Occasionally. You know, and there are some parts of Shark Tank that are realistic, but we have to remember it's entertainment.
Oh, yeah.
And it's designed for entertainment. And I would hope that, you know, one of the things when you do this is you have to learn to say no nicely, right? I would hope that no entrepreneur that ever came before us walked away feeling belittled in the process. The realities are, in most cases, they're not going to get money. We spend a fair amount of time with the local provider community, so the Small Business Development Center, some of the bankers, some of the attorneys, saying, here's what we're looking for, here's how it works, here's the kind of deals we do. And so when people come to us, they're much more attuned to what kind of a deal are we going to do with them. And that helps a lot with it. But you know, we're looking for companies that can scale. These are all early companies. They're all really risky. The first couple of years, we did such a good job of due diligence studying the companies that we turned down everybody that came before us for 2 years. Because you can figure out why you should not invest in any one of these companies, right? The secret to this is understanding what is the risk you're taking and what is the upside potential that might be there, and is that a risk worth the group putting their money into? Yes, sir.
Are you Boise centric, or are you looking for people to get involved with your organization from, say, here?
Well, so there's two parts of that, because there's two groups that are involved with this. One is investors, and we have some investors who typically have a relationship in Boise, but they now live in Arizona or they live elsewhere else, and so that's fine. We need money, so we like having investors. And you know, with the realities of Skype and other things, you know, people can participate virtually. In terms of making investments, we have looked at a couple of deals in Twin Falls. Most angels say this: we'll look at something in about a 2-hour radius to where we are, because we're about economic development in our area. We're also about being involved, and so we're not going to make an investment in Pocatello. I can tell you that, or Idaho Falls, because it's too damn far to drive to go to the board meeting or to be engaged with the company. But if we sort of look at Sun Valley, we look at Twin Falls, we look at Ontario and McCall, kind of that radius. But we've done one deal out of the Wood River Valley. All the rest of these deals are in the Treasure Valley. But
what I meant though is, are you looking for people in our area maybe to join you in investment funds?
the question is, are we looking for people in your area? Well, I'm on a mission. I think that we ought to have groups of angels in Idaho Falls and Pocatello and Twin Falls and Boise and Western Treasure Valley and Lewiston and Coeur d'Alene and Sun Valley. Okay, did I leave anybody out? You know, it's in the pockets. And then when you've got a deal in Twin Falls, and let's say it needs $300,000, and you've got $1 million fund, well, you would not be prudent to put $300,000 in that deal. We have a rule that we will not put a total more than $150,000 in any one deal, never more than $100,000 when we first make the investment, or typically 50 or 75. So there's got to be other people come in. So we invest frequently with people in Montana, Portland, Seattle, and Salt Lake, and we're showing them our deals and they're showing us their deals. And that's one of the ways we go. My dream is that we would have an Idaho Capital Network, and then when you have a deal here that you're excited about and you're willing to do the work on it, you're willing to help the entrepreneur, you're willing to be on the board of directors and make sure there's good governance and as we euphemistically say sometimes, adult supervision, then I think you'd find the people in Boise very interested in saying, hey, we'll put some money in that. And of course, then we'd expect the same thing the other way around. But in standpoint of, we have people out of Sun Valley that regularly come over and attend our meetings. If any of you are interested in attending one of our meetings, love to have you come so you can see the process that we have. If you have an entrepreneur that you think is deserving of this type of capital, we'd be happy to look at it. If you think you might want to invest in a pot, we'd love to have you. But I think my message to you is these ought to be community-centric. And it would be, we would love to see active angel investors in Twin Falls that were supporting the Magic Valley entrepreneurs and helping grow that ecosystem that's good for all of us. Yes?
Yeah, you talked about money, but you also said something about having members on the board of directors. How much do you participate in growing these on a person-to-person?
Sure. So the question is, how much do we participate? You know, here's typically what happens. I'll tell you about a company that we invested in 18 months ago. We're very excited about. The company's called Gen Z, and they have some technology that enables them to apply pesticides to row crops, getting the same efficacy from the chemicals that are being used today, but only applying about 10% of the chemical that's being used today. Okay, so if any of you are farmers, you can do those numbers quickly in your head. And of course you're going, really? But now we have Cal Davis doing the research on it. We have them using it in the lettuce and strawberry fields in Salinas. One of our members is a former farmer who got passionate about this. And that's typically what happens. Somebody in the group says, my God, I met this guy, he's got this technology, you guys, we're nuts if we don't take a look at this. He led the due diligence team, he got people to look at it, he agreed to take a seat on the board of directors. We had 2 funds investing at the time. We've now put $150,000 out of each fund, so we have $300,000 in there. That's our maximum. But what happens is members get excited, so the members have written another $500,000 of individual checks. And you never know, you know, that sort of millionaire next door thing. You know, we're all private people. You know, somebody joined one of the funds, they bought a 1/5 interest in one of the funds, so the total commitment was $10,000. And the next thing I know, they've written a $100,000 check to this company because they know that business. So it varies. We have some people who would never serve on a board of directors. They don't want to do that. They're not comfortable doing that. They think they might take on liability. We have others that find that fascinating to get involved. We ask that everybody in our fund, you know, this is volunteers. It's kind of like a Rotary Club. You know, everybody gets involved on your soliciting for your committees, and not everybody will be involved in a committee all the time, but if the Rotary Club's going to function over the life of the club, everybody better be involved at some level at some time. And so it's sort of that same sort of thing. Anybody else? Okay, thanks so much. It's great fun being here today. And congratulations to you, and soon you can join Jim Hanzo and me with the best title in Rotary, which is Past.
51 more meetings, so